Another very important subject for those of you who are going to be jurors someday is the concept of jury nullification or jury rights. The trial by jury is one of the last defenses of liberty. The ballot box, the jury box, and finally the the soap box, and finally the ammunition box. The trial by jury is one of the basics of preserving what's left of our liberties and restoring them. Way back in 1670, William Penn, who later founded Pennsylvania, was on trial. He was accused of actually preaching without a license. License is, in law, a license is the privilege of doing something which is otherwise illegal. Fortunately, the Founding Fathers set up in the First Amendment the right of freedom of religion. So we overcame all of the centuries of turmoil and fighting and killing that were caused by the lack of freedom of religion. The trial that I'm going to talk about for a minute or two established the concept of jury rights, jury nullification, because Edward Bushell and 3 other jurors on that case realized that if the king could put William Penn in jail for committing the terrible crime of preaching without a license, which we call freedom of speech and freedom of religion, and which is guaranteed in the First Amendment, or at least used to be, then they could be put in jail. So Bushell and 3 of his friends refused to convict Penn. The 4 jurors spent 9 weeks of torture in prison, often without food or water, soaked with urine, smeared with feces. I hope nobody's been eating recently. Barely able to stand and even threatened with fines, yet they would not give in to the judge. Edward Bushell said, "My liberty is not for sale." Although he had great wealth and commanded an international shipping enterprise, these bumbleheads, so the court thought, proved the power of the people. They emerged total victors. The right of jury nullification, the right of jurors to determine the law as well as the case, has been a part of our governing principles since the beginning of the Constitution. Let me quote here a few important statements on this. Okay, the jury has the right to judge both the law as well as the fact in controversy. That was stated by John Jay, the first Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court in 1789. The jury has the right to judge both the law as well as the fact in controversy. Samuel Chase, U.S. Supreme Court Justice, 1796. The jury has the power to bring a verdict in the teeth of both law and fact. Oliver Wendell Holmes, U.S. Supreme Court Justice, 1902. The law itself is on trial quite as much as the cause which is being decided. Harlan F. Stone, 12th Chief Justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, 1941. The pages of history shine on instances of the jury's exercise of its prerogative to disregard instructions of the judge. U.S. v. Dougherty, 473 F. 2nd, 1113, 1139 in 1972. Jury rights or jury nullification, first, as I stated, helped establish freedom of religion, and it helped end slavery and alcohol prohibition also. Now, for the last 125 years or so, judges have routinely told jurors that they are not to determine the law, but you're being lied to when you're told this. So this is a very important thing to remember if you are ever on a jury. There are other important measures that need to be restored. For example, Congressman Ron Paul's Sanctity of Life Act. This would, in effect, take the issue of the right to life out of the federal courts, which Congress can do by limiting the appellate jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, and return it to the states. There's also another fine group called Downsize DC, and they are promoting the idea of actually having congressmen actually read the bills which they're going to vote on. A shocking idea. I favor the repeal of, as I've stated before, I favor the repeal of all federal gun laws, beginning with Roosevelt's exorbitant and unconstitutional tax on automatic weapons. Obama is our most anti-gun president ever. his Attorney General, Eric Holder, is severely anti-gun. The only good sign is that most members of Congress still remember what happened in 1994 when many of them were voted out of office for taking an anti-gun position. He is going to attempt to sneak this through by treaties and other methods of subterfuge. For example, this fraud that many of the weapons in Mexico actually come from the United States. The Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, of course, should be repealed. All federal drug laws should be repealed, beginning with the Harrison Act of 1914. At least the meddling busybodies realized before 1920 that they needed a constitutional amendment to outlaw the manufacture, sale, and distribution of alcohol. Where in the Constitution does it say that the FedGov has any power at all over drugs? It is simply not there. And we come now to an important libertarian principle. I don't use alcohol or nicotine or any other illicit, or currently illegal drug. And I don't encourage people to use it, especially any young people who are listening. But the question is not the use of drugs. The question is much more fundamental. The question is, who owns your body? Do you own it, or does the state? Now, if you own your body, there's no purpose at all of drug laws and many of the other laws which afflict us. If you believe the state owns your body, well, then basically you're a slave already, and I don't think you'll be happy in the Libertarian Party or any other part of the pro-freedom movement until you educate yourself a little more thoroughly. We need to prevent the single-payer plan, which used to be called socialized medicine. Even some people, these are mostly of the more liberal or leftist sort, who realize how dangerous our government is in its foreign meddling, still want the government to control their health. They want the government to control their bodies. This is irrational. Another important thing is to abolish the selective service system. This is another example of at least potential slavery. Our solution to problems, and this will be helped greatly by the Liberty Amendment and by the state sovereignty proposals, is to get the federal government out of almost everything except national defense and a few courts. People ask me how I would improve education. Well, get rid of the Federal Department of Education. And eventually encourage the states and the localities to abolish the government school system completely. The first country in Europe which established government schools was Prussia, and they did so in order to provide good obedient soldiers. They'd been defeated in the Napoleonic Wars by Napoleon, and they didn't want this to happen again. And it came to this country in the 1840s with a very bad person named Horace Mann. At the time of the Founding Fathers, we had no government schools. Founding Fathers were self-educated. And we see the difference between what the situation was then and what the situation is now. I suppose we also need to take care of an important problem which has come up regarding treaties. The Constitution has been misinterpreted for over 50 years as saying that treaties supersede the Constitution. Now, it's obvious the Founding Fathers wouldn't have taken the time to declare independence from Britain and set up a constitution which strictly limited the federal government and which strictly protected the rights of the people if they were going to let everything be taken away through treaties. In 1952, a senator from Ohio, John Bricker, proposed what was called the Bricker Amendment to make sure that treaties never supersede the Constitution or deprive us of our liberties. Section 1, a provision of a treaty which conflicts with this Constitution shall not be of any force or effect. Section 2, a treaty shall become effective as internal law in the United States only through legislation which would be valid in the absence of the treaty. Section 3, Congress shall have power to regulate all executive and other agreements with any foreign power or international organization. All such agreements shall be subject to the limitations imposed on treaties by this article. The Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. At some point, as you become more educated and learn more about what's going on, you're going to ask yourself why this has happened. I believe that the major problem is the establishment media. I believe the establishment media is our enemy. I believe that, let me go on with another group I was just talking to last night called the 912 Project in Burton, Ohio. I was talking with them about the Liberty Amendment. A lot of good groups have come up since last year when Ron Paul ran for president as a Republican. As usual, the Republicans tried to stab him in the back, as they did with Barry Goldwater, as they did with Robert Taft, as they did with Joe McCarthy, and practically any person of decency and honor who stays in the Republican Party. Ron Paul has been about the only one who's been able to stand up to them at all. The 912 group has 12 values: honesty, reverence, hope, thrift, humility, charity, sincerity, moderation, hard work, courage, and personal responsibility. When I signed up for membership, I said I agree with 11 of them. I don't agree with the moderation part, because I do agree with Barry Goldwater, who said that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice, and moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue. Now, if I go under the knife at any time, I want the doctor to be extremely skilled in his profession. I don't want him to be moderately skilled in his profession. Another excellent group, which has been the result of Ron Paul's campaign, has been the Campaign for Liberty. These groups are springing up all over the country. You can find them on the internet and join them too. These people understand what's going on. A lot of them are young people who are very energetic, who will be able to take on the battle once we pass on from the scene, as it were. So there are positive aspects. It's not as bad as the enemy would like us to believe. Another good point here is the issue of energy. The establishment media tells us that there's an energy crisis, that we have to cut down on the use of oil. But go to the internet and look up Lindsey Williams, the energy non-crisis. Lindsey Williams was the chaplain on the Alaska pipeline, and he witnessed the discovery of a 200-year supply of oil on a place called Gull Island near Prudhoe Bay. That has been suppressed from the American people. Chaplain Williams has been telling the same story for 30 years, so I believe him rather than our government. And if the government would tell the truth to the American people about this and many other issues, we'd no longer follow the lie that we have to depend on the Middle East and other foreign areas for our oil. And we could, another reason to end all the entanglements and bring all of our troops home. Another proposal I made when I was running last year was a slight modification of the Interstate Commerce Clause. My proposal, which was taken from the Future Freedom Foundation, was neither Congress nor the states shall hinder, impede, or otherwise limit commerce among the